Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator at Murder by the Book here in Houston, Texas. I am not actually in the store at the moment. I am at my home, and you guys have probably heard me say this if you've been tuning in. But if you are regulars for our virtual events, and if you haven't tuned in this week, you will notice that I have a whole new background behind me. My husband and I have spent last week painting our computer room / library so we could get these cool new bookcases installed. So I'm so excited. I'm actually sitting in a real chair, not on the floor at my coffee table in the living room like I had been before. So the only downside is you will probably see less cats walking in and around me. But like the last couple of nights, they both tried to jump in my lap. So I'm sure you will see them at some point. So we are going to get started with Kris and Gayle in just a minute. But before we do, while everybody is getting their notifications that we've gone live and they're coming to find us, I just wanted to make a couple of quick store announcements. First, we are open for browsing. We reopened in October on Halloween. So the store is open for you to come in. We're still limiting it to 6 people in the store at a time. Some people don't quite get why we're doing that, but the reason why we're doing that is because we have a lot of customers who have told us that we are pretty much the only place that they have gone since the pandemic started, or we have been their first outing, and we know not everybody is comfortable in larger groups. And the store is a small space, so between 6 customers, or 8, sometimes depending with family units, plus 3 or 4 staff members, it can get a lot of people in the store. So we just want to make sure everybody feels comfortable. So we're doing that just so we can kind of get everybody's kind of COVID comfort levels in there. So masks are still required, and we are limited to 6 people in the store at a time. We hope that you will come see us. We know that not everybody is getting out and about in the world just yet, but we're still doing curbside pickup. So if you don't want to come in, but you want to pick up your books, we can do that. We had a table out. We're not actually putting the table out anymore. So when you, for curbside, if you want to do that, just give us a call when you pull into the parking lot, and one of us will pop our mask on and run out to the car and bring the book out for you instead of putting it on the table. Tomorrow is Independent Bookstore Day. So if you have a local independent bookstore close to you, check out what they've got going on. We will have some of the Independent Bookstore Day exclusive merchandise available. If you spend over $100 in the store or online tomorrow, we'll give you one of our poison mugs for free. And we're super excited. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we are partnering with the Mystery Writers of America to host a panel for all of the people that have been nominated for Best Novel this year for the Edgar Awards. The MWA has partnered with different stores to host different panels for the different awards, and we're so excited for that. So we hope that you will tune in for that tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central. I'm going to bring Kris and Gayle out in just a second, but while they are chatting, if you guys have any questions for either author, please post those in the comments on Facebook or YouTube, and we will leave some time at the end of this evening to get to those. So I hope you guys will have lots of good questions for them. So we are going to start with Gayle. I'm going to bring her onto the screen. How are you tonight, Gayle?
I'm good, thank you. How lovely to be here, finally, in your marvelous store.
Yeah, we were just talking before we went live, but that's kind of one of the great things about being able to do this stuff is there's so many people who have told us that they've wanted to get to the store or do something at the store. So this is a nice way to welcome you virtually into the store, and hopefully at some point we'll actually get you to Houston, but it's nice to be able to do this now. So thank you so much for agreeing to chat with Kris with us this evening. So for everyone tuning in, let me just read you Gayle's bio real quick. New York Times bestseller Gayle Lynds is the award-winning author of 10 international thrillers, including The Assassins, The Book of Spies, and The Last Spymaster. Her fiction has won numerous awards. Publishers Weekly lists Master Raid amongst the 10 best spy novels of all time. Library Journal hails her as the reigning queen of espionage fiction. With Robert Ludlum, she created the Covert One series. The first, The Hades Factor, was a CBS miniseries. She recently appeared on CBS Sunday Morning, and in the deep, dark past, she shattered the glass ceiling of Baltrcon's infamous all-boys poker games. She's the co-founder with David Morrell of the International Thriller Writers and lives in Maine with her husband, John C. Sheldon, a retired judge who's now writing fiction. Poor man. And one very bossy geriatric cat. So as we said, Gayle has agreed to chat with Kris with us this evening. Kris is going to be celebrating the release of her debut novel, All That Fall. So let's bring her on the screen and say hi to her. How are you tonight, Kris?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me, John. Hi, Gayle. It's great to see you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Congrats on the new book.
Thank you. It's very exciting. This is my celebration, so I'm happy to do this.
So for everyone tuning in, Virginia-born award-winning thriller author Kris Calvin lived there just long enough to acquire a Southern accent so she could be teased when she moved to California at age 5. Educated in economics and forensic psychology, Kris has been honored by the California Governor's Office and legislature for her leadership in child advocacy. A single mom, Kris and her kids are faithful at San Francisco Giants and Warriors fans, but their favorite place is the public library. And you can visit her at kriscalvin.com. I'll link both Gayle and Kris's websites in the comments here on Facebook and YouTube if you guys want to check those out. And so, like I said, before I turn this over to Gayle, if you guys have questions for Kris or Gayle while they are chatting this evening, please post those in the comments. I will pop back in just a little bit to relay those. But for Gayle, for now, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you guys chat, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much. What a thrill it is. I read Kris's book several months ago, and I was honored to give it a jacket blurb. It's really a stunning debut, All That Fall. And one of the best parts for me was the memorable lead character, Emma Lawson. She's the youngest government ethics investigator in California's capital in Sacramento. Would you tell us a little bit about her and how she came to be? Because you have such an interesting and deep background yourself in government and private enterprise.
Sure. So Emma has a job that probably doesn't exist in California's capital in exactly the way that I gave it to her. But what I did was merge a couple of agencies that look at corruption in government and also look at good government, and thought, wouldn't it be interesting, and if it's going to happen anywhere, it would happen in California, if we actually had an agency that looked at sort of future ethics. Is the government working in a way that would give us an ethical California in the future? And I was interested in having a young woman in that role who did not have children. I think it was mentioned, I have 3 amazing kids, Aaron, Matt, and Nate, and I've been raising them for a long time as a single parent, and they're now launched and doing great. But I really spent most of my life, the most important thing was those interactions. It was what happened with my children. And I think having Emma explore a life where she's on her own. The most important thing to Emma really is to be independent. She had a difficult childhood where her mother died when she was 11. Her father disappeared shortly thereafter. And so Emma was more or less abandoned with a grandparent who wasn't very good at raising her. And so the way that she comes into this story is as someone where work is the most important thing, and being able to take care of herself. She doesn't really trust letting people in, but she's made a best friend. A woman has moved in across the street 5 or 6 years ago, another single mom who has a teenager now. The young man's name is Luke, he's 15. And so Emma gets involved almost in a family type situation. So part of the story, even though it's a thriller and it takes place over 48 hours and everything's happening quickly and there are murders and kidnappings, the core of the story really is this character Emma, who doesn't want to be dependent on anyone and doesn't want to have people really dependent on her. But suddenly, very quickly in the book, Kate's son Luke goes missing. The 3-year-old girl is kidnapped, and Emma has to use the skills she has in her investigative role to try to find these kids. And as I said, it's just 48 hours, so it happens really fast. But that's how Emma sort of came to me. I don't outline. I don't spend time doing a character bio or figuring out who someone will be. I think of a situation and sort of put the characters there. And I know it sounds corny, but I know there are authors who do this, who are here tonight. They decide what they will do. And I just do my best. I sort of see it visually like a movie. I do my best to translate it onto the page.
So speaking of other authors here tonight,
Yes.
I believe one of my oldest and dearest friends, and someone that you care about very much and cares about you, was a big influence on your writing. And by the way, John, I have not forgotten our poker games.
So Gayle is referencing John Lasquan. It's true. I was living down in Southern California when I first started writing, and I was reading John's Dismiss Hardy series and thought, this is really the kind of tone, the dialogue, the pacing. It just felt both clean and powerful to me. And so I knew I couldn't do that. I knew I was a beginner. But as I started to write, I would do a chapter of mine, and then I would read a chapter of one of John's books. And I had never met him. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know if he was a good guy, a bad guy, nothing. I just knew his writing. And then I moved up to the Capitol. I had been flying up here for work for a long time anyway. And I came up here, and I happened to meet him at a gathering of some of the authors up here, Katrina McPherson and Eileen Rindall and Spring Warren, a number of them. And John was there. And he had given a blurb to my book without my knowing him. The publisher asked him, and he was generous enough to say something. And so he had read at least some part of the book. And so at this gathering of authors, when he met me, he said, "Oh yeah, let me tell you about Kris's first chapter." You may not remember that, John, but that was like the biggest moment in my life, that here's someone who I had looked up to learn from, talking about some small part of my work in a positive way. And since then, I've become friends with John and his wonderful wife, Lisa, and know him to be a wonderful person in addition to being this stellar writer. But I still return to John's work when I feel that I'm getting bogged down in dialogue or pacing.
Yeah,
he's been quite an influence.
Beautiful writer, absolutely beautiful,
Yeah.
Lyrical. Yeah, and a good story. Keeps you really engaged. But then yours do too.
Thank you.
I noticed that one of the things that I think is really important for readers to become engaged in a book is setting. They have to really feel it, smell it, see it, the textures, the sights, the landmarks, or the homes. And so you have set this book in Sacramento. And why? Could you tell us a little bit why you chose it, and maybe some of your favorite parts about Sacramento that you mention in the book?
So not only don't I outline, I never wanted to be a writer. I'm not someone who kept journals or diaries and thought someday if I only make it, I'll write a book and it'll get published. I was involved in child advocacy with the Academy of Pediatrics in California, with fabulous pediatricians working on children's issues. And I wasn't interested in fiction. I studied economics and sort of analytical things and just read all the time. And because I was in Sacramento, there are obviously lots of motives for murder and bad things happening if you're in and around government. Unfortunately, lots of good things happen with government as well. But ideas came to me because I was here. And so the idea that I had for the book, I never considered another place to write about. I don't think I would be writing if I hadn't worked for years in Sacramento in the Capitol. And so while my books aren't really political thrillers, I don't consider this a political thriller in the sense that there's not Republicans and Democrats and fighting and all kinds of things going on in the Capitol itself. It's against the backdrop of a political setting. And that was just the only place I could write about. So my favorite part of the Capitol is the Capitol building, is the white dome, the way it looks like the Capitol in DC. It has sort of gold coins plated on the very top of it. To me, no matter how difficult democracy gets, that is still inspiring to me. And there's even a scene in the book where Emma goes there and she's driving there and she says, she's not like me in almost any way, but that came from me, where she says, no matter what's going wrong, that inspires me to see that building. Also, I've met a number of people, some of them may be joining us tonight, lobbyists, legislators who get a bad rap because people think of politicians as only self-interested. Many people go into politics literally for public service. My son, who may or may not be here tonight, one of my two sons, and I have a daughter, as I mentioned as well, is a public servant. He's on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. And so I watch him every day doing good things for people and serving people. And that's how I think of the backdrop for this book, that it's not that ugly place people think of, although there's corruption in the book. There can be good things that come out of that setting.
Corruption and secrets.
Yes.
And power and adventure and questions that need to be answered, and right versus wrong, ethics, morality. There's a wonderful sense of we are better than this about the book. And when you were talking about the Capitol, that reminded me of that. And I think we need that these days. It's something that we can all share, that we have aspirations for a better world. And I just, you captured so much of that, sort of the drive that so many of us have for that.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to try something out on you.
Okay.
There's a wonderful old writer saying in writing. Books are not written, they are rewritten. And I remember reading about some of the drafts that you went through when you were creating this book.
Because I don't outline or have any structure, the first draft is obviously fuzzy. I remember Katrina, who I mentioned, Katrina McPherson, called a first draft once a fuzzy daydream, and I think that's kind of what it's like. I just took an idea as though I would tell a story to you, just making it up. And so clearly that's not something that you can turn in, although I didn't know that. I was so happy that I had written a first draft that looked like a book to me. But when I sent it to a development, I thought I sent it to a developmental editor who actually told me it was terrible. She said that because I knew how to write clearly from all the work I had done with doctors, writing memos and so on, but that I didn't have anyone doing anything other than seeing things. They didn't taste or touch or hear or smell. And so I had to go back and try to learn how to put senses in the second draft. And then by the third draft, I had to deal with setting. And so I was learning as I was going along. All That Fall took 17 drafts. I did eventually go back and look at them in the computer. At the end is where I do the structure that a lot of my author friends do at the beginning. So I have big charts on the wall. I have spreadsheets. I keep track of how many times each character appears because I don't want a character in chapter 3 who's fairly significant, who you don't meet again until chapter 47, because I remember who they are, but the reader won't. Since I read 2 or 3 fiction books a week, I'm very aware of how I experience books. And so that last draft is about me as a reader reading my book and checking for the things that would annoy me if I were a reader reading this book. So I do my best at the end to do what a lot of people do at the beginning.
You know, that's a wonderful explanation. When I finished my first book under my own name, I stacked up all of the versions because that was before. Well, I guess it was. I was working on a computer, but I was printing out every draft, and it was well over my head. All those stacks.
Wow.
Yeah, but you know that one of my very favorite editors once said to me, writers who do not understand the importance of revisions, who don't glory in revisions, and don't come back to me with a better revision than I had suggested to them. Those are the ones I worry about, and they won't last. The ability to rewrite is incredibly important, and the ability to take suggestions, criticism, with the idea that the manuscript itself is much more important than our ego. And there are people who never really can get past that. So look at you. I mean, look what you've done. You're self-taught, but you're not self-taught.
Well, thank you. I guess it took me a while to learn to listen to other people. People who know me through my work in advocacy know that with advocacy, you have to really be committed to something. You still have to listen to everyone and have it be, may sound cliche, but sort of organic in how the policy develops. But nonetheless, you're committed to a core, whether it's healthcare for everyone or eliminating homelessness or whatever it is that you're committed to. You have to have this really core commitment. And in writing it's a little bit different. You may have something that feels core that is getting in the way of what a reader would enjoy. And I did take a workshop at Thriller Fest, the International Thriller Writers Association's annual conference, with Lee Child. So it was a master workshop with about 8 of us, and we each brought 10 pages. And he was kind enough. He had lots of coffee, just like Jack Reacher in his books, to have read them and then to give us advice. And one of the things he said to us as a group is that you have to listen to other people when they comment on your work, but only if something resonates with you. If you feel like it's the right thing to do, then make the change. If you don't, even if everybody in the room is telling you you've got it wrong, maybe you're the one who has this new way of writing, this new idea. So he helped me sort of see that, that skill of listening, but seeing if it resonates. And for All That Fall, I did have Eileen Rendall, who's also a fabulous author in her own right, but she was my developmental editor, one of them, and she really helped me. The book is an ensemble piece. The first probably half of it, there are many points of view and characters who you're getting to know, and then it sort of focuses in on Emma, and it is an Emma series. There's a book 2 on its way, and hopefully book all the way to 10, I'm hoping. But in the beginning, it's all these different characters, and I had to listen to Eileen when she would say, you really don't need point of view 12. And I was just like, but I love that person. So that listening and being able to take expert advice, I think is really important.
Oh, it's so critical. I had a friend, a well-published author, who won awards, hit the bestseller list, everything. But he would get into, so thus far, quarter of a way into a book, a halfway into a book, and then he wouldn't know where to go with it. He couldn't figure out what to do with it. He had 10 partially finished manuscripts in his drawer. And I'm sort of a collaborative person. I love brainstorming. I love exchanging manuscripts, depending on what my work schedule is like. And I said to him, why, maybe you want somebody to read them and maybe somebody can come back and brainstorm with you? Because to me, this is gold. It's a treasure chest of possibilities. And if a manuscript is genuinely bad, that's one thing. But if it's good and you just don't know what the heck to do with it, talk to somebody.
At a certain point, I think definitely. I don't know when you first share. Yeah, for a lot of us, I think initially it's hard to do. Yeah.
Well, of course it is. It's always hard to do, but there are some people. I know when I first started out, I really wanted to complete a manuscript. At that point, my previous husband was still alive, and he was an Edgar-winning author. So we were very collaborative that way. We brainstormed and worked on each other's stuff. But I would always want to finish the book first. So I'm dovetailing on what you're saying, because that was what was inside me. But then would come the brainstorming and kicking things back and forth. So to me, it's a growthful process. It's full of optimism. You're making a commitment to the book. But the reason I'm bringing up my other friend is because we all have different ways of working. And that was his way. And he still is amazingly productive. He's just got all those books in the drawer.
Right. I think another thing, and this again is similar to policy and politics to me, is it's very comforting to listen to people who think the same way that we do, and maybe even write books that feel similar. And in the beginning, I was doing a lot of that. With All That Fall, I had two people help me to edit, and one is Trey Geisman, who I think is on the call, and another is Haley Galper, who are much younger than I am, who are my kids' age, but really articulate and good with writing and editing. And I asked them to take a look from their point of view, in their 20s. What does this look like to them, and how does it read to them? Because I think getting alternate perspectives as readers can make the story richer.
I agree. And I think also particularly when one is in the beginning of one's career, because some of this stuff, it's like driving a car. When you first learn how to drive a car, I learned on a stick shift, and my father made me drive backwards. He wouldn't let me drive forwards until I could drive backwards really well. Now, I do not understand the logic of that. He was an engineer. I know it made sense to him. It never made sense to me, but that's how I learned to drive. And I can remember driving down the street, and there were just so many things. There's the rear view mirror, there's the side view mirrors, and I think I had a clutch because it was a straight stick. And I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm thinking, I'm an idiot. I can't do this very well. I have to think about everything. And then I looked out at all these other people driving, and I thought, well, I can't be dumber than all of those people. I must be able to do this better than I think I can. And that's what writing is like, I think, in the beginning. You are thinking about characterization. You're thinking about setting. You're thinking about sensory details. You're thinking about your plots. You're thinking about your overall story. You're thinking about so many things, keeping the guns straight, the knives straight, whatever kinds of stuff you've got going on, the secrets straight. And then after a while, after you've been doing it for a number of books, it's easier. You keep a lot more straight. And you still need at least I still want the brainstorming. I still want to talk about the book with one or two people I trust. But that's one of the nice things about developing, I think, as a writer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't have enough experience yet to know, but hopefully, I mean, I'm learning from you, and I'm learning from a number of people who are here tonight.
You're off to such a great start.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's more fun than I knew it, or that I could have imagined. Again, because I didn't picture being a writer, and I was actually probably more closed to anything creative in myself. I wasn't a very joyful child, and I found sort of joy and happiness in stories, as many kids do. and would go to the public library and read about quests and children who were threatened by dragons and monsters and evil villains, but somehow either they saved themselves often in children's books or someone saved them. And it was that kind of adventure story that I think really drew me to thrillers as an adult and to crime fiction, is this idea that if I could give those same kind of stories to adults, again, not terribly violent, and I don't have harm come to children in any of my books, even though there's a kidnapping of a child in this book, but where we could be on the edge of our seats, which is what I was going for. I think that's it's like being able to go on a roller coaster, but in your house, literally an amusement park roller coaster, is to have that kind of excitement. I think especially during the pandemic and now, safe kind of danger and safe excitement. It for me at least is just very cool.
Yeah, and that comes across, that whole sense of the whole part. In fact, one of the things I wanted to ask you, I know the way I work, and we don't all work alike, and that's one of the things I think is so much fun about talking shop, is finding out how other people work. But I generally have something that just utterly fascinates me, that is the thing that triggers a book, and then other things that fascinate me come in, and or things I want to find out about, I'm curious about, or whatever. So would you talk a little bit about what got you started on All That Fall?
So I have to pause because I don't have that. As you said, we're all different. Like, I didn't have something driving me to write that book or that fascinated me. I initially thought of the friendship between Emma and Kate was very important to me. Yeah. How do people create a family? I mean, I wasn't thinking about it that way, but I was seeing Emma sort of create a family among friends their own age. And when the book started out, my son Nate, who is now studying artificial intelligence and doing all kinds of interesting things, but at that time he was a bit younger, and I had an idea about something that could happen with someone his age, and started the book really with Luke and Emma trying to help Luke. And the story took off for me when 3-year-old Vivian appeared, even though that wasn't an inspiration. I wasn't planning to write about a 3-year-old. She just sort of marched into a scene. And I remember talking, I don't know if Eric's on this call, but Eric Ball is someone I worked with, and her name was Vivian. I said, I don't even like the name Vivian. Like, I need her to go away and come back in with a different name. But I don't have that control over, like, she was stubborn. She was 3. She was Vivian. So, and Vivian's a lovely name, but I didn't like the name for her, for this 3-year-old. So I never had a moment where I said, this is what I'm going to spend a year on. This is meaningful to me in a story. I've been lucky so far, and I know I will jinx myself here. I haven't yet had the manuscript in a drawer, or the thing that started that way that I didn't finish and couldn't do. I'm so new to this that's inevitably going to happen. I know all of you authors out there are saying, yeah, next year you're going to write some book that you can't take anywhere. But for now,
not necessarily.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. Let's hope that. Let's hope that. So I never, again, I think I keep coming back to, I'm a reader first, and I think of writing as an extension of being a reader. I want it to work for the reader, and so and the characters do come to life for me. I've heard other authors say this. I don't know if this has happened to you, but I've had a character die and start crying as I'm writing it. I'm just like, well, then don't let them die. Have someone come in. No, they're dead. It's just like, you can't. It's a process. And again, not everyone writes this way, but as a reader, it never occurred to me that the characters, other than in like a Garfield movie where Garfield controls his owner, it's like that the characters determine what happens in the book never occurred to me. Do you have that? Or, I mean, do your characters?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I count on characters appearing. And sometimes they do, they go off on journeys that really aren't right for this book. But that doesn't mean they're the wrong character, or it may mean that they belong in another book.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think has really been important for me, and I think is maybe true for other writers who've been doing it for a while, is our ability to cannibalize our own work. If I take out chapters or scenes that for whatever reason, don't work in this the book that I'm working on, I will always save all that stuff, because it's amazing how I can even bring back paragraphs that I'm particularly fond of. I really love the sound of words, and it's obvious to me you do too. And so when I have phrases that I really particularly am fond of, and I can't use them for whatever reason, I have a whole document called outtakes.
Oh, how nice. That's a good idea. Yeah.
And if I'm stuck in a book, that's one of the places that I can go to get inspiration.
Yeah. One thing I just wanted to share that I didn't say earlier that I realized sometimes I don't think in a straight line, and I have to come back to it. When you were asking about Emma as a character and the inspiration, and I was thinking about what you just said and sort of outtakes and starting over. I don't put real people in my books. I can't remember who taught me that you can take someone's physical look if they inspire you, but then you have to give them a different personality, or you can take someone's personality, but then you better give them a different physical look so that you're not just dropping. I do know authors who put people in, and it's fine. There's no law against it, but I don't, as someone new. But my daughter has done just remarkable things in her life in terms of being a death penalty appeals lawyer and working in public policy and in criminal justice. And I think I got inspired to write a woman sort of at the heart of criminal justice issues, even though that's not what Emma does. Emma's name is very close to my daughter's name, Erin, too, by thinking about what would happen if a woman was smart, had these skills, and got in a situation where she had to take something on. I don't know that I could have done that if I didn't have a daughter in my life who was close to that age, so that I could sort of see how that worked. So Emma isn't Erin, but there was enough inspiration there that it helped me.
As an outsider, but a fellow writer, I would have said that Emma was the reason you wrote that book.
Wow.
She is. That was what was fascinating you. That she was able to address issues that are very important to you, but she could do it dramatically in a story, and she had the kind of decency and intelligence and bravery that she's learning about her bravery in the book as she's challenged. But to me, she's sort of the big idea. That, and of course, government and children, because you've been a child advocate all these years. By the way, I will say, too, there's another saying among writers, no writer had a happy childhood. And, we all mine. And I mind everybody I know. We all mine our experiences. But then we go do research. And that's another writer saying research is not a four-letter word. It's not.
It's definitely not.
Now, there are people. Now, Dennis, my previous husband, whom I adored, he passed away in 2005. He hated to do research. He hated it, but he wrote detective novels and knew all that stuff anyway. But he hated it. He'd write the whole thing, and then he'd go look stuff up, which meant he had to go back and rewrite because he got it wrong. But that's the way he worked. And with me, I love research. Now, with you, you've lived this life.
So you researched before because you came out of working in, I don't know if it was the CIA, but you worked in some kind of agency and then wrote espionage. So you researched before you wrote?
Well, I was an editor at a think tank.
Oh, that's right. It was a think tank. That's right.
And I had top secret security clearance. So I saw a lot of stuff, and I met a lot of people, and I had a lot of fun. I just learned a great deal. I was young and a sponge. But for me, I'm a researcher. And I do. When I got very excited on my last book, when I read that Saddam Hussein's personal fortune, which was estimated about $70 billion, it's never been found. And we've looked for it. Russia's looked, all kinds of governments have looked for it, and we have never really uncovered it. It was one of the reasons we thought we could pay for the Iraq war, was we would get our hands on that money. It was mostly gone. So I figured out a way that he could have hidden it. So that was one of the things that fascinated. But that came from research. So I do a lot of reading and researching ahead of time. And then I reach a point where I can't stand it anymore. I'm just so full of it. And I already have collected several ideas like that one about the fortune. I wanted to find it in the book.
And so then
I start writing.
Yeah, I don't.
And then I go back and research because I never have enough.
Yeah, I don't research at all. And I think it comes from being, I comes from being a policy person where you talk to stakeholders and people who know about it. So I get an idea and then I contact people. So in the book I'm writing now, I thought about having an autonomous vehicle, the driverless car. So I did call that son Nate, who's studying AI, and said, what can you tell me about autonomous vehicles? And he's very patient and very kind and waits and walks me through it and what books. And he sent me some things, what I might read. And then I just lost interest in autonomous vehicles. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do this other thing. And I again, talked to doctors. I talked to my daughter and my son, Matt, about issues, and friends and authors that are on the phone. And I just think it's because you were in a place, a think tank where people did research and you were editing. And so that was a skill set that you brought and then wrote after that. For me, the skill set I have is bringing people to consensus, sort of conflict resolution, getting a bill written. And that's less me going off and doing research. It's more me getting information from people who know more than I do and then building it into the book. So I write more, I think, like what you said, your husband, I think you said his name is Dennis. Is that right?
Yeah,
your other. So I did more what he did. I write the book and then I can see the holes. So what kind of birds are there down near the river in Sacramento? And then I go look and I get images and I figure out how to describe the birds. So all those holes I fill in after the book is written.
That's research. I mean, talking to your neighbor over the fence between your 2 yards, because that neighbor has just come back from Timbuktu or Sacramento, and finding out what their trip was like. And then you find you've got a way to use it in the book. You've just done research. And one of my favorite expressions is when you're writing a book and you open the refrigerator and there's nothing in there but moldy food. That can be research, because if you start asking yourself, what kind of mold is that? Can I kill somebody with it? And research. I mean, there's just, and
that has not come to me when I've opened my refrigerator, but okay.
And
crime fiction, absolutely.
Bob Ludlum never worked undercover, or he was never a part of CIA. And what he always said, and this was true of me too, is I know people and I have an imagination. So research is not just reading stuff. It's getting on the phone. It's going places to see what they look like. It's watching things on YouTube and television. And there's just, as you're pointing out, your son, I use my kids. The research is finding answers to your curiosity.
But I do think...
but I do read a lot too.
Yeah, so the reading, I also think, you mentioned Emma is sort of at the heart of all that fall. And I think for me, the stories I write are character driven, more so even than setting and more so than plot, I think. I don't know. I can't read it the way you can read it. And so that's kind of research of the heart, right? That's being willing to you don't become that person. I don't know what it would be like to be an actor, but just letting yourself feel in the situation. Let's say that that Emma gets terrible news. How does she react? To me, that's not something I can research, right? That's only either my experience or the experience of friends or loved ones. So I think it's interesting being a writer in thriller, mystery, crime fiction. There are a lot of facts. You were mentioning the kinds of guns. That part just drove me crazy. Does it have a cylinder or a magazine? Or, I was like, what's happening when somebody picks up this gun? That part was hard for me. But to me as a reader, what I want to know is, could this person, could they exist in the real world? Are their feelings believable to me, and are they consistent across different scenes?
And you pull it off beautifully. And I don't know that I would call that research either, because so much we bring to our books is life experience. The unexamined life is not worth living. I can't remember who said that. And
I don't know either. It's a good saying, though.
I'm paraphrasing. But what's one of the things that all artists tend to do, whether they're painters or screenwriters or landscapers, we mine our emotions and we pay attention in ways that perhaps other people get away with not doing. And maybe thank God we're also different. But in our corner of the world where we have to create believable peoples, I think that's where experience, paying attention, and the imagination come in. But yeah, I remember I was writing about what is the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. See, I needed that for one of my books. So I had to go and I actually had a student who was a shrink. And so she and I had some wonderful conversations about that. She had treated both. Oh my God.
Wow.
So, you have some fun along the way, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what's going to happen with Emma next.
So I am very far along, fortunately, with Emma's next adventure, because I have to turn it in August 1st. So I've been doing a lot of work with it. In the first book, as I said, just in 2 days, basically after you meet these characters and have the ensemble, then it's almost not a chase, but an investigation and a lot of fear and resolution of these various threads of kind of bad guys and other people. This book starts with her at the commission where she works as an ethics investigator. And so we're going to see what kind of project she has and what can come from that work that might then be dangerous or cause problems. There are also family threads that I won't do spoilers, but that come in this book as well. The question is, will Emma ever be open to a sort of a real romance, given that she doesn't trust people and she does have these abandonment concerns? She kind of likes her life with her friend Kate and Kate's son Luke, and she has a sister, Jasmine. So she, that may happen. There may be a romantic interest in this book. But I think, she'll grow some, although in series, something I've been learning that is interesting. I was reading about, again, since I don't outline, how do you kind of determine the arc of a series as opposed to a story? And so I think of books as the protagonist has to have a quest and barriers get in the way, and then they change and they learn something. But how much does a series character learn? Because you want your readers, or at least when I read a series, I know what the person, whether it's Dismas Hardy or whoever it is, I know what they're like sort of book to book, and they do grow and they do change, but there are core things that are the same. So I think in book 2, Emma will still be very consumed with work, but beginning to open certain doors, and it will have a little longer time frame. So we'll get to see her in some other situations. But always for me, they have to be adventures. They have to take me out of my life at home. They have to take me to a place where I can see danger and then be safe. That's what my books are about.
Yeah. No, putting the world right to a certain degree at the
Mostly
end.
right. Some people die, and so I can't help that. Sometimes people we like in these books die. But yes, putting the world right in the sense that there is a feeling that the danger was worthwhile, that the risks that people took, some of them may have been foolish, but that there was a reason and somebody got saved and something got better. And I'm excited for that. And again, I do feel like I love reading series. So I would like to see Emma be long-lived. You don't know as an author what your opportunities will be. And especially since I didn't start writing until I was older, I'm 65. And so to start a series at 65, you kind of go, I hope fate and everything else is with me so that I can write 10 or 15 or however many of these that I get the opportunity to do. I think that also informs the way that I write. Is everything to me is precious now. I mean, I think that's true for people who are young as well, maybe even more so because they're growing up in this pandemic and they see how time is lost and friends and grandparents are lost. I mean, for all of us, everything is precious, but there's a different sense to it, I think. Just a different way of feeling that it's precious. And for me, that is, I get up every morning, I write at 4. It is something that I couldn't imagine not doing now. And it has helped me not view myself as sort of plodding along until my life is over. It's like, wow, what's going to happen to Emma? That is part of, as someone who lives alone, it's part of what energizes me and keeps me connected.
And it is contagious. You are contagious. I mean, you're so delightful and modest.
Oh no, that's so nice. Thank you.
And infectious. Your enthusiasm. I mean, this is what writing is for those of us who really love it. Now, let us ask John. John, do you have anything else for us? Any questions or?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we do, and I also I think I said when I was introducing you, Kris, that this was your first novel, and if I said that, just want to correct that it is not. So I'm sorry
It
that
is
I got
sort
that.
of. It's correct because I had one book that was a Kickstarter, so you put it up and people pre-order it. I've never had a book contract. I've never been traditionally published, so this is my debut novel in that world. So that's correct.
So we've got lots of great people watching. Misty Berry said that she just finished the first chapter and she can't wait to read the rest. Lots of other people are agreeing. And John LaSquad's wife is watching and with him, and so she said they're both there watching. So hello.
Hi, Lisa. And John.
And Katrina McPherson, who we adore, is also watching. She said that you're a scholarly pantser who studies hard, and she's a realist without a cynical bone in your body.
Wow, Katrina, that is just really kind. That's very nice.
Your son Nathan is also watching.
Nathan!
And Arlene wants to know, what was the most inspiring and most challenging experience in writing the book?
Was it I heard the challenging part. I was getting too excited about Nathan. What was the first one? Inspiring and challenging?
Inspiring and challenging, yeah.
So I think inspiring was how the 3-year-old coped with the situation that she found herself in. Without giving any spoilers again, I won't put children where there's egregious harm or where it's terrifying, but it is frightening to this little girl, the situation that she's in. And there are some moments where she has to rise, even as a 3-year-old, to make decisions and take steps. And so that inspired me, again, because she came from lots of children I've seen who are resilient and come through things. So that was probably the most inspiring. The most challenging thing, I think, was getting the various threads. There is a subplot that has to do with hate crimes, and I didn't want to have cartoonish villains who are hateful and white supremacists who just sort of have that stamp on them, but there isn't any understanding of why the different dynamics are happening. So the most challenging thing for me was to get people who are doing just really, they're called hate crimes for a reason, hateful things, and have a human, not trying to make them understandable, but just real and have real people involved.
And so the second part of Arlene's question is, she wants to know, I love this question, what did you learn about yourself in the process of writing this book through its publication?
Wow. So what did I learn about myself through its publication? So I don't think of myself as controlling at all. I think of myself as someone who likes to work collaboratively and listen and give everybody a chance to say the things they want to say. In my day job with the Academy of Pediatrics in California, my title was CEO, although that meant like I had a half-time assistant and one other person. So it's like a big title for just trying to get a whole bunch of things done. But I didn't think of myself as having to have things done a certain way. And when you enter the world of traditional publishing and you have a publisher and you have an agent and you have a publicist, you have people who are helping you. I was fortunate because the publisher I'm with, Crooked Lane, invited my input on the title, on the cover. I mean, real input, like give us, a document with everything. What do you think the cover should look like and different things? And same thing for the publicist. I'm working with Dana Kay, and here are ideas. Here's what you can do. But in the end, I had a hard time just not doing it exactly the way I wanted to do it, as opposed to being part of this team. I haven't been in the non-executive role, even though, again, I'm using executive loosely with a couple of employees. That was challenging for me. It was a learning experience. I adore my agent, Abby Saul. I would write more books just to get to work with her because she's smart and funny and helps me with everything. So I have this great, I'll call them, they're not my team, I'm on their team. That has been the learning experience for me, is can I accept that something doesn't look exactly the way, not visually, I'm not talking about the cover, but I love the cover, but something isn't exactly the way I would have done it if I were in control. So I've learned I'm somewhat controlling, which I didn't know.
Well, I imagine it's got to be a hard balance, because at the end of the day, like you said, you're working with this team, but at the end of the day, it's like it's your name that's attached to it, that's on the cover. So I imagine it's got to be hard to kind of reconcile that with kind of the other team aspects of it.
Yeah, though again, I've been lucky because every one of the groups that I've worked with has invited. I do hear stories about authors who are just locked out of everything, and that has not been the case in this experience. But nonetheless, I've learned that I have to be talked down sometimes by Abby. You know, is that the is that the thing you want to argue about? Because really, all these other things are exactly the way you want them. So learning that has been good.
And how about you, Gayle? Do you have any input kind of in that kind of working with publishing team kind of aspect?
I've been in this business a long time, and there are really marvelous people. I can't think of anybody I've worked with, whether I've agreed or disagreed with them, who doesn't love books. And I think that love of books is too often forgotten because of the business aspect, because it's a business too. Publishers do need to make money so they can stay in business and publish our books. And so we readers have books that we can buy or borrow from the library. So my overall experience has been really been pretty good. I had the problem, of course, of being a woman in a male genre, and that was challenging.
So Sarah wants to know, Kris, what is it like being a full-time writer now?
So I was surprised to find, because again, my day job was 60, 70, 80 hours some week. It was just a ton of work. And I didn't imagine that anything could be that much work. But writing while launching a book, so not being able to separate those two things, where a full-time writer means I get up at 4 and I try to live in Emma's world and be creative and not have any noise. And then at about noon, doing these other things. Many of you receive these individual emails from you. I care about each of you. I write you. I have things that I want to say. The way that I approach the putting my book that's done out in the world and writing at the same time was giving me those same 15, 18-hour days. And so it was not at all what I expected. I thought it would be, I'm going to write and wander around and take a walk and I'll work out and be, whatever. None of that was true. I was just always behind, always having charts of what has to do with the launch and what has to do with the book. Amelia, who is also, I hope, on the line, as someone who has come on to assist me with a lot of the things that I'm trying to do, and I couldn't have done most of this without her. But I think that I feel like tonight is my graduation party. Like, I feel like if you're in high school and you're graduating, like the launch is kind of, I'll still have things to do with the launch, but I took finals, I got all the promotional pieces out that I wanted to do, the wonderful columns I was able to do. And now being a full-time writer starts tomorrow, is what I feel like. And then I have 3 months to finish this book. And so I think it will feel different. So if the person who asked that, if you give me your email, I'll tell you in a month what it feels like to really just write, because it'll be different.
And sort of going with that, Susan wants to know what motivated your change in career to writing?
So I thought I was going to be at the Academy of Pediatrics for about another 4 years. I was not intending to leave and write and not be a child advocate as soon as I did. But the pandemic meant that one of the primary income sources for the Academy of Pediatrics, where I was in-person educational meetings for doctors. And we didn't have ours last year. And so that's about 40% of the revenue. So the organization is very solid. It had tons of savings. Everything was fine. But it made me start thinking about, wow, I've been here 30 years. I'm expensive relative to someone coming in who's newer, who's learning more things. And for the organization, it's probably better if I make that transition sooner rather than later, given what has happened. So when I left January 6th of this year, that was not initially planned to go into writing full time, but it coincided with me having the 2-book contract. So now that it's done, I miss my colleagues at AAP, and I have not. I don't think I'll ever stop doing the child advocacy work, because I can do it as a volunteer, as a consultant. But I'm not 40. I'm not where I have years and years and years to write, and I have so many books that I want to write that I'm glad I did it now.
So Eric asked, I'm going to throw this to both of you. We're going to start with Gayle. So he says, who are some of he says non-thriller authors, but I would love to know who are some of your favorite non-thriller and also thriller writers. Let's start with Gayle.
Oh gosh, well, I do love John Lesqua's work too, and Katrina McPherson. Oh, let's see. Well, another author who's published by you, by your publisher, Kris Goff, who writes really amazing thrillers, international thrillers. I love Carla Neggers. I love Lisa Gardner. I'm a voracious reader also, so it's very hard for me to say, these are my very, very favorites, because it's usually the book I'm reading right now, if that makes sense. Which is true of my own books. If you ask me what were my favorite books of my own, it's the book I'm working on now.
So I can't do that because I do read 2 to 3 fiction books a week, thrillers, non-thrillers, everything. I love them all. I love Gayle's books. I mentioned John, Katrina, Eileen Tampson, who's on the call, I think, as well. There are so many amazing writers. I can name the book that I read most recently, or actually listened to on audiobook, that is right now in my head. There will be another one next week, but A Gentleman in Moscow, I believe is what it's called. And first of all, the audiobook is the person who reads it, but it's about a count so an aristocrat in Moscow at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. And so he is arrested and sentenced to house arrest in a luxury hotel where he's been living. He can't step out of the hotel or he'll be shot and killed. He has to stay in there because he has some reasons that he has value. And so during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, especially, how this man's life from age 30 to age whatever, I won't do any spoilers about how long he lived or what happens, but the people he meets in the hotel, it's a character-driven thriller for sure. And so again, love many authors, but right now that book, to me, what I look for in a book is delightful. And delightful might also include tense and scary and, Meg Gardner, Bob Dugoni. There are lots of thriller writers who are just amazing. Jess Lowry. But right now, A Gentleman in Moscow, if I was going to tell anyone to listen to any audiobook, I would listen to that book another time. And it's long.
That's been a huge favorite at the store too. And,
really?
It's one of those. Yeah, and it's one of those, it's not necessarily kind of, the traditional mystery, but it's one of those, like sometimes people come in like, oh, why do you have X, Y, or Z if it's not a mystery? But it's just one of those books that for whatever reason, it just grabbed one of the staff members, Brenda, and it was her favorite book the year it came out.
Oh,
and
Brenda. All right, Brenda and we're right there then. Gayle, have you read that, A Gentleman in Moscow?
No, I have
Or
not.
do you listen to audiobooks? Because the voice also is just, the actor is just amazing. So anyway, that would be my takeaway from tonight. If you haven't heard that, definitely listen to that.
And so I've got a question for both of you from Katrina. She wants to know, how much do you have to be careful what not to write, not to say, or not to let slip, given that you've worked in politics and high security settings? Let's start with Gayle.
Well, I had to sign an agreement because I did have clearance, and it lasted for 20 years, which I thought was pretty clever. I had a friend who was in OSS, and at the 55-year mark, I had no idea. He calls me up. I get this phone call, and he's old, he's garrulous, the whole thing. He said, Gayle, I was in the OSS. And I said, OSS, because I know what OSS means. I had no idea he knew what OSS meant. And that's the precursor to CIA. And he said, yeah, but I couldn't tell. I signed a 55-year agreement.
Oh my gosh.
So he was so excited. So he went around, he told this was when I was living in Santa Barbara. He told everybody, and we were all cheering him on because, of course, it was really important work. But I only signed a 20-year agreement. And now this is what I think is hysterically funny about this. So 20 years passes. I don't remember anything.
Maybe that's why they took 20 years. That's
what I think. I think our memories have gotten shorter. So they figured, well, 20 years will work. Now we're at 55 work. So the only thing I'm ever careful about is if I do have information that the public that's classified, and it only happens infrequently. Most of the time, everything I put in my books is public information. But you probably won't know about it because I've had to dig so hard to get it.
Oh, that's interesting. So it makes it almost like it's secret. So I don't have the same thing where I have things that I'm forbidden to say, but working as I did in an interest group, really for the pediatricians, we learned that first of all there are no secrets in the Capitol, no secrets in Sacramento. So anything that you say, you better be willing to have it on the front page of the New York Times, because no matter if you think only there are two of you there, somebody's going to repeat it. So it's the same thing with my books. I'm very careful. Anything I put in there, I can't later say, well, I didn't really mean that, or that came because I thought Democrats or Republicans do this. You have to own everything you ever say in the business that I was in, and say the same thing to different people, to people who agree and disagree with you. So it's the same in my book. I have to be willing to live with whatever character I create, whatever they do, forever. So it feels similar.
And so Catherine wants to know, do you have any recommendations or advice for someone who's considering writing for their next career and following in your footsteps?
Absolutely. So start tomorrow. Do not figure out what you want to write. Do not figure out how you're going to write. Pick the time of day that works best for you. So depending on your life, if you have a current job and you want to transition out, don't wait until you've left your other job. Find that hour, whether it's in the evening or whether it's the morning, and start with anything, with any scene, something that happened in the market that caught your attention, or maybe you already have an idea for a book, which is great. But basically get in the habit, just as though if you were a painter, you take the paintbrushes out every day, even if you just do one stroke. Get in the habit of writing every day at the same time of day, whatever time works for you. And occasionally you'll get tripped up and you can't do it, but then do it the next day. You become a writer by writing. There's nothing else magic about it. And the moment at which you can leave your day job is when you can afford to, which isn't the way mine worked out. So we'll see what happens to me that way. But you don't have to sequence it. If you want to write, maybe you're already writing some now, but you're thinking of leaving to do it more. I couldn't tell by the question. If you're already writing, you are a writer. If you want to be an author, don't get hung up on how that writing is going to find a publishing home. Just write every day. If you want more advice, I know we're constrained today. I don't know whether my advice will be any good, but please email me. I'm happy to chat with you on the phone or talk to you about how that came about for me. But the main issue is I think anybody can write and publish. It may happen different ways for us at different times in our life, but creativity is something we I think are afraid of, or at least I was, or guard. Just go for it. Just write.
Let me add one thing, because Kris, I agree so much with what you're saying. You got to put your butt in the chair. I think one of the things that happens to so many writers, particularly at the beginning of your career, is isolation, and you're working alone. So I recommend that if you can find a good adult ed class to go, so you're with people who had the same dream that you have, and they're working and they are learning, and you are in a situation where you are with your fellows. That is, to me, part of the journey, being able to know that you are not alone, because you teach each other. And you listen to each other if it's a good group. And the same is true of conferences, going to whatever the field is that you're writing, and go to conferences. Pay attention. And also during criticism, it's always about the book, never about the person. And if you get into a situation where, if you're going to conferences or workshops or classes, that's what the focus should be on. And you'll know if you get uncomfortable, it's not where you belong. But writers groups are wonderful. It's astonishing what you can learn from each other. And then you come up in publishing together. You have a long history together, just as you do, Kris, with John.
Right. Yeah, I've never been in a writer's group, although there's a group from Davis that now meets Wednesdays, not Davis and Winters, and sort of writes next to each other. We don't critique each other's work, and they've been doing it much longer, and I go occasionally. But I agree, not getting too isolated, although some of us, I'm sort of reclusive, despite the fact that my life has not permitted that. Some of us gain from that quiet and aloneness, but if you let it go too far, you lose the ability to think of the reader and to extend your work out. So I agree with you, Gayle. You have to find a way. I love conferences. I'll go to every in-person conference when they start again. I'm going to BoucherCon. I'm going to Nashville. I'm going to hopefully go to Malice. I love them all. So I do agree that's a big part of it.
And so, Gayle, you've been so kind to donate your time to chat with us this evening. Can you give everybody a little sneak peek maybe on what you're working on now?
Yeah, I'm working on just a little one. I'm actually working on 2 different books. One of them is about a scientist who has an extremely important discovery in Moscow, a Russian, and he needs to be extradited. Got to get him out of the country. And it ain't easy.
That sounds cool.
So thank you both for joining us this evening. Just a recap for anybody who might have tuned in late. If you missed any part of our chat this evening, once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it so you'll be able to rewatch parts of it. Sometimes YouTube takes just a little bit longer to get the recap up. They have to do some like extra encoding step or something. So it might not be up immediately on YouTube, but it should be up within the next couple of minutes, both on Facebook and YouTube. If you enjoyed the chat, we hope that you will share it with your family and friends. Also, while you are on the YouTube channel, make sure you surf around. We have tons of author events. We have done over 200 of these with over 300 authors since the pandemic started this time last year. So whichever subgenre mysteries you like, we've got all the authors are there, so we hope that you will spend some time there. As I mentioned before, the store is open, so we hope you'll come in and visit us, whether it's in person or at murderbooks.com. I wanted to send a big thank you to Gayle Lynds for chatting with us this evening, and huge congratulations to Kris Calvin, whose new book, All That Fall, has just come out. You guys, thank you so much. This has been so much fun tonight.
And thank you, John, and thank you to the store. It's amazing. And Gayle, I just have to say, she held my hand through all of this. She talked to me on the phone today. She told me how to get through it. And so I can't thank you enough, really. So
It's
thank
a pleasure.
you. And Murder by the Book. Yay.
Yeah. This has been great. It's been so much fun seeing so many names that we know and recognize in the chat. And so, hopefully by time book 2 comes out, Kris, the world will have righted itself enough that we'll be able to get you to Houston and sign with us.
I would love to come to Houston. Would be great. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Gayle.
Take care.
Good night,
All right,
everybody.
thank you.